Good morning from Hong Kong. I appreciate it's a completely different time where everybody else is, but it's a nice, bright, sunny morning here in Hong Kong. So welcome. I just wanted to take 10, 15 minutes just to introduce the design field school that we're running as part of the APRU Sustainable Cities and Landscape Hub conference. The conference is based in Hong Kong U, and we've decided to run a design field school in parallel to that conference, hopefully to bring some of the students from participating universities together to study sustainability issues in some of Southeast Asia's most spectacular locations. We're going to base this field school in the Indonesian island of Java. We're going to be in Eastern Java, which is an extraordinarily rich, very diverse landscape, which is undergoing enormous changes at the moment. We're going to be visiting some of the key moments, key points within the island of Java. Next. So when we go there, what we'll be looking at some of the key sustainability issues that the Javanese are facing, particularly things like modernization. It's a rapidly modernizing society. There are great moves to intensify agriculture. There's a big industry in terms of resource extraction. Ecotourism is a rapidly growing business for the Javanese. Set against that, we have some very strong issues relating to environmental conservation, dealing with the impacts of climate change. There's a very unusual form of urbanization that we see in Southeast Asia, not just Indonesia, but all around Southeast Asia. It's called Desakota. You can look that up. It's a sort of rural-urban settlement pattern, which makes the island, the whole of Java, is very populated. It's a high population, but they're mainly a rural population. But there are also issues of things like migrant labor. There's some very dramatic changes in gender roles going on in society, changes in public health and education. There's a lot for us to study within this particular environment. Next. The school, I'm going to lead the school. I'm Mathew Pryor, by the way, from Hong Kong University, and that's me in the top photograph, waiting out a rain shower in Batu, talking to my students. The photograph below that, the gentleman on the left, that's Michael Kokora, who used to be the director of OMA here at Hong Kong, but he's now teaching with us. And he's discovered that one of the few words that the local Javanese ladies know is selfie. So last time we went, we had a whole pattern of sitting down and having selfie with the locals. And he will be joining us, I hope, to teach the school when we're in Java and Bali. Next. Java is a very interesting territory. It's a territory that the world has largely ignored in the last 100 years. And this is exemplified by the famous Hollywood movie Krakatoa East of Java. And the interesting thing about this movie, it's a sort of typical 1960s disaster movie, is that the title completely ignores the fact that Krakatoa is west of Java rather than east of Java. It didn't seem to matter. Nobody really cared. It was just a backdrop for another disaster movie. And it exemplifies the attitude of the West, of the industrialized nations to Java as being a completely end of the world, isolated, out of the way place. And there were fairly good reasons for that. Next. Java used to be the center of world trade. If you go back to 300 years under Dutch colonial rule, Java was a very, very important trading center. And the whole of Southeast Asian trade, in fact, much of world trade came through the South China Sea, the Java Sea. And Java was known for its spices, for its raw materials like teak, as a trading port. And for a few hundred years, the Dutch controlled Java, and they fought very intensely against the British, the French, etc., to maintain their trading routes to Java. So having been a center of world trade, suddenly in the 20th century, it fell out of people's notice. It became very much an end of the world place. So it's very interesting to understand why that happened. Next. So we're going to go to Java, we're going to travel around Java, and we're going to have a look at some of these issues, particularly how since the liberation from after the war and the Suharto period, there's a sudden burst of activity, a sudden burst of modernization from 1980, 1990 through to the present day. The place is rapidly urbanizing, it's rapidly developing, and a lot of the sustainability issues are very evident in the society. And so we're going to be traveling around some of the areas, trying to understand how these issues are playing out against this spectacular natural landscape and the very rich cultural heritage that they have. Next. So these are just some images that I took when I took a similar group to Java last month in March, traveling around. This gives you an idea of the scale of what is happening. Still very largely a rural agricultural society, but with this sort of intense road-based urban development and a lot of rich resources. You see in the top right-hand corner, cocoa pods. We're going to see a cocoa production area. The photograph in the middle, very big apple growing area just north of Milan. Down bottom left-hand side, you can see that the mosque there at Bouzouki, it's very much a Muslim community, but very diverse, a lot of different ethnic groupings. So all of these provide a very interesting backdrop against which to understand sustainability issues. Next. So the itinerary for the field school will start in Hong Kong and then fly to Surabaya via Kuala Lumpur. And then for 2 days, we'll spend traveling around Surabaya. Surabaya is this big city on the north side of East Java. It's got a population of about 6 million people. It's about twice the size of Los Angeles, but nobody's ever heard of it. It's the old Dutch trading port. They have a lot of urbanization problems. They have a lot of natural disasters. The bottom right-hand corner, the photograph there is the Lapindo mud volcano, which was a resource extraction disaster that took out a large part of the south of the city. And you can see students there just standing in the middle of about 60 square kilometers of toxic mud. So we can have a look at some of the issues relating to that. But we can also look at things like changes in society, the modernization of society, people moving from the rural areas to the city, the change in the roles of women. We can look at things that we can go to things like the Surabaya songbird market, the trade of endangered species, etc. I'm hoping also that we can tie up with the Balai Besar Conservasi, who are an environmental group, tell us something about environmental conservation as well. So we'll be meeting local people. We'll be tying up with students from the University of Petra, some of the architectural students there, to really get inside issues very quickly. So we've got 3 days in Surabaya, and then we fly to the east. We fly to Banyuwangi, and that's our plane. It's a very small plane, and air transportation is now the primary transportation in Java. You don't travel anywhere by road because it's too slow. So we'll fly to Banyuwangi, we'll drop our bags at the hotel, and then we have a midnight trip up to Mount Ijen. That's the bottom right-hand photograph. We'll look at the blue flames coming out of the volcanoes up there. We'll visit some of the sulfur mines. You see some of the sulfur miners there. I have to warn participants that this is a fairly strenuous part of the trip. To get up to Mount Ijen is a hike of about 90 minutes. So that's an uphill hike. So you need to be fairly able to undertake a hike like that, and it will be quite warm. The sulfur mines will have to wear sort of gas masks to get down into the sulfur mines. But that allows us to look at the issues relating to resource extraction, migrant labor, child labor, and how the balance between preserving natural landscape and making use of natural resources plays out in this particular environment. The following day, we will go to Sukamade, the Turtle Beach. Again, that's a drive, that's about a 3-hour drive, off-road drive, down to the very south of Java, to the beach. We'll look at the turtles coming ashore. Again, that's a nighttime exercise. laying their eggs. We will spend overnight on the beach, and then in the morning we will help the local conservation team releasing turtles back into the Indian Ocean. So that's a very special experience. Again, it's a little bit of a rough experience, but very much an experience I'm looking forward to. We then come back to Banyuwangi. We will visit coffee, rubber, cocoa plantations. We'll understand a little bit more about the way that the area is developing. And then one more night in Banyuwangi before we head even further east. We will head across the water to Gilimanuk, and then take a coach to Ubud, which is the cultural center of Bali. And we will spend a couple of days in Ubud trying to understand the ecotourism, cultural tourism, and particularly the impact on Balinese agrarian landscapes and society from this mass influx of tourists. We'll spend a couple of nights there, then we go south to the capital, Denpasar, spend a couple of nights in Kuta, which is very much the tourist capital, and have a look at the impacts of both of mass tourism and also things like ocean plastic problems. Bali has a big ocean plastic problem, and hopefully we can get to see a little bit of that. So that's the Balinese section of this journey. Final section, September the 5th, September the 6th, we fly from Denpasar to Hong Kong, and we spend 3 days running in parallel to the APRU conference. I'm hoping that the students will be able to participate in the conference and choose one of the working groups and sit in those working groups. Otherwise, there are 1,000 things to look at in Hong Kong, a very, very different type of environment in which to study sustainability issues. The photographs on the left, some of the mass public housing effects that we have in Hong Kong. The one in the middle, the Shekip Mei resettlement, I'm hoping that we can house students in one of these resettlement homes from the 1950s, again, to get an understanding of the problems in Hong Kong's recent history about housing and settlement and the various quality of life issues that go with that. So there are 4 days, 3 days in Hong Kong, running in parallel to the conference, but really also an opportunity to understand Hong Kong as being the opposite extreme in terms of urban rural environments and how sustainability issues are playing out there. These are just a few of the images next. From Hong Kong U, the East Java studio that we ran in March, some of the blue skies that you can see in Java next. A visit to tea plantations, to a sustainable tea plantation. So these are my students wandering through some 30-year-old teak plantations, trying to understand the economics and the social aspects of teak production all across the southern side of Java. Next. These are my students visiting the Mount Bromo volcano on the back of jeeps, and this is the sort of the transit that we will be taking when we go to Mount Eaton and Sukamade. Next. And this is Lapindo mud volcano, just an extraordinary experience. Yeah, to get to the mud volcano, you have to get on the back of a motorbike. So you need to be a little bit brave if you're not used to traveling on the back of a motorbike. Otherwise, it's an extremely long walk. Next. And this is us interviewing locals at Balangkampang on the southern side. This is the Indian Ocean. These are the beaches south of Malang, and similar to the beach that we might see in Sukamade. Next. And of course, students, whenever you take students into the field, we have to have the photo opportunity. Next. But what is particular about the way that we run these schools is that we partner with local groups, local universities, the tour guides, local NGOs and government officials, really trying to get their view, their perspective on what is happening and to get their understanding, rather than it just being a tour from the back of a bus. So the encounter with locals is a particularly strong element within these tours. Next. Just a quick word about the APRU conference. This is a working group conference. This is academics coming together to sit in small groups, maybe just 10 or 12 people sitting together to discuss issues relating to particular themes. This year we're hoping to run 12 themes. Last year in Portland there were 10 themes, and we brought most of those forward with us. And I've listed out those themes. You can check out the website and check out a brief description of each of those working group themes. These academics will sit together, try and discuss, try and develop an agenda, look to develop some sort of chapter for a book, a conference book, and maybe develop other research projects between themselves. I found it a very invigorating process sitting amongst, I'm running the Productive Cities Industrial Ecologies group with Jacques Zabelman from Portland this year. I found it a very invigorating experience talking to other people in a very focused way in a closed room environment. And we got a lot of very interesting ideas within the space of 2 or 3 days. I'm hoping that students from the field school can attend one of these working groups, or maybe sit in a number of the working groups to get a flavor to join some of the discussions that go on in those. Next. So each of the working groups produces a chapter, produces some papers relating to their discussion. There is also one day in the conference that is an open public forum where we get members of the working groups to present their current research to members of the local profession, NGOs, government officials from Hong Kong, southern China, as a way of giving out. It's also a way of making money, but a way of giving out some of the information that we are developing within the working group conference. As I say, there are quite a lot of local field trips, study tours, site visits in and around Hong Kong. And if you look on the website again, you can see some of those that you might be able to get involved in. Next, costs. The cost is somewhat dependent on airfares and accommodation. And I've been working with local partners in Java to try and get the best rates as I can. Quite a lot of the costs, I say, within airfare, fly from Hong Kong to Surabaya, from Surabaya to Banyuwangi, from Banyuwangi bus to Denpasar and Ubud, and then we fly back to Hong Kong. So that's a substantial amount of the cost, plus the accommodation. The accommodation, I'm trying to get reasonably good accommodation. I mean, not, this is sort of 2-star, 1-star accommodation. It's not 5-star accommodation, sadly. To keep the costs down. That's coming out at about $25 a night as a shared accommodation. If we can get cheaper accommodation with reasonable accommodation, we will try. There are quite a lot of costs in terms of local travel, entry fees to sites. There's a very big informal economy in Java where you have to pay to get through roadblocks and everything else to get access to certain sites. And that's why we need local tour guides to get us into some of these places. I've estimated the cost of the field school at about $1,625. I'm still working with local partners to try and define exactly what that is. That covers all the flights, all the hotels in various places in Java, Bali, and Hong Kong, and local transportation, guides, entry fees, etc. It doesn't include things like your food, personal items, expenses. If you go on other tours, other trips, you decide to go back and see something in the evening, you have to pay for that. It is based on a basic flight package, sort of 20 kilograms baggage, basic meal. If you want extra on these flights, you have to pay for extra. A lot of them are budget airlines, so they come with very limited facilities. And it doesn't include personal travel insurance. You'd have to take out your own personal travel insurance. So what is included, I've listed there, the travel, the ground transportation, the hotel attendance at the conference, and the school fee to pay for instructors and local guides, etc. is covered in the total cost.
Our student have a question about why do we have to fly from the US to Hong Kong? can we start from Eastern Java and end up in Hong Kong?
I have set this up as a basic itinerary. If you wanted to meet me in Surabaya, that's fine. I do need students to get back to Hong Kong to participate in the conference, which is why I started in Hong Kong. The cost of the flight from Hong Kong to Surabaya is about $150 US. If you wanted to meet me in Surabaya, that's fine. But I will do that on an individual basis and make that arrangement on an individual basis. If, when you're in Hong Kong, you wanted to stay at different accommodation, that would be something that you could arrange. I recommend you don't, but it could be something that we could arrange alternatively on an individual basis.
Thank you.
Okay. If you wanted to participate in the field school, check out the website. I need basic information from you, usual contact details, who you are, etc., where you are. I do need one academic from your program to vouch for you. I don't need a letter of reference or anything. I just need a name, make sure that you are there. And if you can give me a very brief statement, no more than 200 words, telling me why you want to participate in the design school. Maybe tell me which of the sustainability issues you're particularly interested in. And that will help me to understand a little bit more about you and your interests. So you can apply, and this is more of an expression of interest, to participate in the field school. The application is now open, so you can apply at any time. Apply up to the 24th of May. I will close this application 24th of May. I will spend a week with the APRU team to choose applicants. We have a target of 28 students. That's actually an upper limit. I'm really looking 24, 28 students is about as much as I can take, and that is driven very largely by local ground transportation issues. If we get more than 28, then we're obviously going to have to make some selections, and that'll probably be just drawing people's names out of a hat. I will notify people by the 31st of May. I need you to pay, if you're selected, I need you to pay by the 7th of June. If you've got any questions, you can contact me or either via this email address or Mathew.Pryor@hongkongu.hk. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on the field school or on the conference. I would highlight that there is a little bit of coursework that goes with this field school. It's not just sitting in the back of a bus. I will get students together in small groups to document their journey and document it through the perspective of somebody that they meet in the local environment in Java or Bali. So I will be asking you to make a video to explain a particular issue from a particular local perspective. I will give you all the guidance on how to do this when we get there. But we've done this in the last studio that we ran last month. Proved to be extremely effective as a way of understanding what's happening in Java and to be able to explain to each other different perspectives. The last slide is some course readings. We will try and bring in some academic aspects to this. I give you these course readings as the sort of things that we might be looking at to try and understand what we see when we're in the field, and to try and both find a theoretical framework for it, conceptual framework, but also to relate it to academic research and current government strategy and policy within these areas. Okay, so that's all I have to say. If anybody has any questions now, I'm happy to take the questions now.
Do we need to send along resume or portfolio with the application?
Absolutely no portfolio. What I'm asking for is your name, contacts, which university you're at, which program you're in, a referee, the name of an academic within your program that can vouch for you, and then just a brief statement. Don't bother with CVs or sort of long descriptions or anything like that.
Okay.
For visiting Kuta and looking at the plastic pollution of the water, are we actually addressing and looking at the source of it? So like the lack of landfills and how the locals dispose of their plastic?
Can you hear that question?
I'm afraid I can't hear these.
Okay. So she was asking about the plastic pollution and will we be looking at the sources of these plastics?
As far as we can, yes. What I'm hoping to do is look at some local small-scale initiatives for the coastal villages to try and tackle plastic within the village. The source of the plastic, well, I hope we can team up with a local expert who can tell us something about that. We will see in the cities and as we travel through the countryside, we will see where this plastic is coming from, which is really a change in the nature of the waste within society. Java has typically been a rural society with biodegradable waste. Up until the last 20 years, suddenly this influx of international products and the packaging that goes with that is generating a lot of waste, plastic-based waste, that they can't treat in their traditional way, which is to burn it. So this waste just piles up. And one of the earlier slides I showed was of piles of plastic bottles up on Mount Bromo. They really don't know what to do with this plastic waste. They don't have the infrastructure to deal with it. And a lot of it gets blown around and blown into the sea. So we'll pick up some of these issues along the way.
If we decide to meet either in Hong Kong or East Java, can we come before the field school and do some exploring?
Can students do some individual exploring of the local area before the design field school?
Yes, certainly. The field school really gets together for the first time on the evening of the 27th in Surabaya. As long as you can be there and join the school, that's great. If you want to spend a few days in Java, or you want to go to Jakarta, Yogyakarta, you want to go to Borobudur or places like that, yes, why not? But I need student participants in Surabaya on the evening of the 27th.
Okay. Yes.
I know that there was the intent that the field school will be related to the APRU conference. It's not entirely clear to me how the subject matter of the field school relates directly to the conference. Will that be made more explicit in the field school?
I heard the question. The field school runs in parallel to the conference. And you can see from the descriptions of the working groups the sort of issues that they will be dealing with in the working groups. The issues that we will encounter in the field school are similar, they're not directly related, because I didn't want to pair the field school with a particular working group. I would like to allow people on the field school to find their own specific interest and then to align it to what is happening in one of the working groups. So for instance, if you're interested in migrant labor, change in gender roles, etc., we can have a look at those issues as we go around Java. And then maybe you can sit in on the vulnerable communities group within the working group conference to hear a little bit more, maybe a slightly different perspective on those sort of issues. I didn't want to make too close a tie because I thought that was going to be a little bit too limiting.
Great. Any more questions? Yes.
You mentioned the review research question at the end of the dialogue in each working group. Will there be like a continuous research project that will follow the conference potentially with people involved?
Can you hear that?
I did not. No.
Okay. So students asking about the outcome of the working group. Will we be continuing with the working group to make production of the results? Will there be a project after the conference?
The commitment of each working group is to draft or to write a chapter for a conference book. That's the minimum requirement for the working group. Many of the working groups have developed specific projects between the working group members that they then carry on themselves. And that is driven by individual members within the working groups, whether it's writing papers, whether it's a edited volume, whether it's actually a physical project in the field. So for instance, last year I was in Jacques Zabelman's infrastructural ecologies group, and that led me on to partnering with people like Jeff Howe, Professor Jeff Howe from Washington, with a group in Singapore, the Asian Research Institute, on a much bigger urban agricultural research study. That just came about because I sat in that working group and made friends and developed a separate research project. But for the conference itself, for the working group itself, the only requirement for each working group is a chapter to the conference book.
Okay, thank you so much, Mathew.
Oh, my pleasure. Nice to speak to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, send me emails if you have questions.
Thank you.
Okay, cheers.
Have a good day. Bye.